Hi, so this is my research short one. Um, my topic was using conversation as a tool for guiding mathematical content knowledge and the implementation of mathematical skills. And the subtopic I'm focusing on right now is making mathematics real to students. So I have two articles. The first one is the real world connections, and the second one is curriculum connections. So one is focusing on making math practical outside of school, and the other one is kind of telling talks about students making connections between not just like math as an isolated subject, but as a way to explore other contents like literature. Okay, so for this first article, which was the one that was talking about making connections to the real world. The purpose of it was to see what kind of connections teachers were making and what influenced the connections that they made. So the sample was 62 teachers. 28 of them were middle school, 34 of them were high school. And it's kind of weird because they said in total, but then they told me that they also had 22 master's candidates working on it too that were outside of the teachers. I don't know. So the teachers were either middle school or high school mathematics teachers in two different school districts. It was qualitative research. The major findings that they had were that teachers mainly teach a skill rather than focusing on whether or not they're making that math practical or for practical use for the students, because that's not as high of a priority. So they put the skill or like the recall basically over the application is what I saw, and I was like, okay, that doesn't really make sense, but because it's all about how well they can use that knowledge. If they don't know when to use it, then what's the purpose of it? And then the other one said the top reasons that teachers surveyed said that they do not use real world connections is because they need more resources, ideas, or trainings about the connections to make and how to make them, and they tend to take up more time. The teachers feel like they can spend. We always talk about how time constraints, but if the mathematics isn't purposeful, what's the point? Some evidence I saw within the article was using mathematics in a real world context. They found that most teachers will use examples that relate to money or building infrastructure because they believe that students can relate to those types of examples best. I feel like myself, I do the same thing. So students like money, they like to talk about it. So I tend to lean on that as well. But like with my little kids, we'll talk about games that they like to play and stuff too, and like point systems, and they like that. But in this article, they talked about those are the two reasons that like structures that teachers put their real world context around the money or infrastructure. When they do use real world context, the questions and tasks come from their own brain instead of a textbook or curriculum guide. And some of the main purposes of using these real world based questions are to motivate students, make math easier to understand, and show students that math is everywhere, and to convince them to see the value and the usefulness in their lives. The conclusion was this suggests that many teachers are willing to make more connections, which should encourage teacher educators to incorporate specific preparation for making connections to the real world. So, saying that we need somebody to help us help us teach the students how to make the connections. And the study is an example that the teachers focus more on meeting students where they are instead of challenging them. Many of the teachers surveyed believe that concepts should be fully developed before making real world connections. Kind of disagree with that. I feel like you can learn them at the same time, but I do understand that if they don't know how to do something, it's going to be hard for them to try to solve problems in context easier. It's going to be a lot harder if they don't know if they don't have all the skills to solve the problem. It's kind of like you just really have to think about the difficulty that you give these students the option to learn these new skills. So now moving on to Article 2, the purpose of this one, this is the math and literature one. The purpose of this one was to analyze the connections between literature and math to see if students could recognize concepts of math and literature. There were 26 third graders involved in this. It was qualitative research. Some of the major findings were not only did students make connections between math terms found in literary work, but they enjoyed reading those texts. Students were eager to read new texts. They also engaged in conversations with other students about math that they found in their books. Eventually, students started recommending books to each other. So within this study, within this article, I read about some of the little comments that they made. They saw it was a lot more of the math terms that they saw. Like first, they started off with the math curse, and you know how they were talking about how math is everywhere, and they moved on to when they were reading their own books, they were looking at terms like multiple and stuff like that. You know, things that they've seen and they can recognize what they mean. And then one of them had like skip counting in that, and they recognize, oh look, the skip counting. If I keep skip counting, I can figure out what it is. So I thought that was interesting. The conclusion for this was that incorporating math into more than just a math lesson increases student engagement and attitudes towards the subject. And these are my references.